My name is Jesse Strawbridge, as our fine golden-voiced MC just said. I'm part of the business development team here at MadPow, and I'm excited to be talking today about behavior change and behavior science and how to build that practice within an organization. And we have got two folks here who have experience doing just that, so you're all lucky because of that. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. So, hi everyone, I'm Neesha. I have been at Prudential for 5 years and have held over my career, even before Prudential, various product development, marketing roles. I went back to graduate school to study what we would now call decision science. When I went to graduate school, that was not a thing. I studied neuroscience and economics and public health, and eventually got this really cool opportunity at Prudential when one of our senior leaders said, hey, I really want to build out a practice. Neesha, will you take this on? And so it's been a really exciting journey for me over my career, right? One of the things that I and probably many of you in the room have been confused and wondered about is like, well, when we do go out and do this research and when we ask people, hey, if we build this product, will you buy it? And they all say yes, and then you build this product and then nobody buys it and you wonder, like, what did I do wrong, right? So this is really confusing for me as well, and I really wanted to get underneath that, and this practice of behavioral science and this thinking has really helped not only shape the way I think about how to approach consumers and approach product design and development, but also has helped me, I think, become a better business person and a better thinker overall. So hopefully we're able to talk a little bit about that today.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Dustin DiTommaso. I've been at MadPow for the past decade now, I think this month or last month. I came on board specifically after meeting Amy Cueva to look at how we can use design and behavioral science as well as technology to change people's behavior in the real world. And what we mean by that is we have a big focus on health, as you know, and in financial services. So how can the artifacts, technology, services that are designed help people make better decisions, help people follow through on those decisions, and ultimately do things like prevent chronic condition through behavior, spending and saving behaviors. And my time before that was at the Media Lab doing a similar type of role, but more focused on how do we motivate learners, and with a deep study on what kinds of motivations and motivators help people in blended learning technologies and things like that.
What about the rock band?
Yeah, I did that for a little while too. Spent some time even before that touring with Nine Inch Nails and Korn and Marilyn Manson and things like that. But yeah, there's some behaviors there that that I've been privy to.
That is awesome. So in terms of what we're focused on today, behavior change has been a hot topic for a number of years now. I'd be curious to know, just from the audience here, of the organizations you're with, do you have dedicated behavior change or behavioral science teams as part of your organization? Love to see a show of hands. Not that many. Okay, well, this is a very awesome topic then. So we're going to be talking about both evangelizing the practice and building some momentum for a practice internally, and also the components of who makes up these teams, how do you find these people? So Dustin, starting with you, when you think about behavior change and behavior science, where do you suggest folks focus in terms of providing value to the organization?
Yeah, sure. Well, the beauty, the word behavior is in the title, right? Whether we're talking about either behavioral science or behavior change generally. And I think that's an important thing to focus on because I would state that most of the goals that we are trying to achieve in organizations require some kind of behavior. Someone needs to do something, right? So in order to find those outcomes, define what those are, we need to understand which behaviors lead to the outcomes that we're looking to occur. And we also need to understand behaviors that might be getting in the way, right? Competing behaviors in whatever we want to do, whether those are customers, whether that's inside the organization, whether that's a patient. And being accountable for setting up those bridges, crisply defining outcomes, how we measure those, targeting those behaviors and understanding to the best of our ability what kinds of factors inhibit or enable those behaviors in the populations we care about. We can think about that broadly in segments and populations, or with technology, we can get down to the individual level and think about, particularly over time, machine learning and AI, what data points can we use to, what's our best guess and what data points can we use to change those behaviors over time? So focusing on behavior, focusing on outcomes, and understanding those drivers in a rigorous way, I think is really what we're tasked to do and should be measured on.
Terrific.
Yeah, I absolutely concur. I think, as I, over the last year and a few months, have been building this practice at Prudential, one of the things that I am constantly focused on is how I can drive outcomes and prove those outcomes to my senior leadership. I work at a large financial services firm. We care deeply about meeting our outcomes and having them well defined and making sure that when we spend money that we're having some kind of positive return. And so, behavioral science doesn't always lead to positive return, and sometimes that can be a learning that we need to set up as well. But I think the outcomes point is really, really important. And I think for many of us, for anybody who's really tried to do any kind of behavioral science work in an organization, what you find, I think, is everybody loves to talk about it, and it's really exciting, and everybody will come to your talk. And then later people will leave and say, gee, I just don't know what to do with it. I don't know where to go from here. And this is where I think teams like ours can be so impactful in an organization by helping teams understand how do you build hypotheses, what does experimentation look like, what does good experimentation look like, how do you do research in a new way. So I think this is a real positive value add that behavioral science is bringing to organizations that traditionally haven't done some of that stuff.
Neesha, I'm curious to hear, as you've built momentum, what have you learned during that journey? What are the things that stick with you as important for folks out here who may be thinking of doing the same thing? How did you go about it? And then, of course, the demand that you're generating, how do you meet those demands too?
Yeah. So what I've learned, right, and I think this is sort of, I feel like, a blueprint, because somebody told this to me and I kind of didn't believe them, and then I did it and it worked. So one is really democratizing the knowledge. So I spend a lot of my time teaching behavioral science at Prudential. I teach workshops all the time. I take many teams through, these 10-session courses that I've built. I spend a lot of time building partnerships with academic centers, with other behavioral science organizations, not only just because you need friends, and I don't have too many of those who do this kind of work at Prudential, and so, I need to check my thinking, and it's nice to have people to do that with, so that's certainly a value, and we'll talk about this a little later, but also for pipeline development, it's very important to have good connections with academics who are doing this kind of work and are bringing students up in this space who don't, necessarily just want to be PhDs. And then finally, I would say, is around this, find people within your organization who want to do this work, who are interested in it, and who can be your evangelists. I heard that word previously too. People who are interested in saying, all right, yeah, come in, work with my team, build some tests, let's try this, let's get something in market, and let's see if this works, and work really hard at getting, those teams up and running and doing this work. And I think that goes a long way. There's a book, I can't think, is it Givers and Takers? Adam Grant, is it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I always say, be a giver in this role. It's really important to be a giver and to not necessarily know that you're going to get anything in return, but that tends to build a lot of goodwill and really has helped me build this practice out. And in terms of the second part of your question around kind of, now that we've built up demand, and it is sort of a nice problem to have. A lot of people now want to do this work at Prudential. And I would say now that we're looking at, okay, now where do we take it from here? Now we're in the mode of sort of developing processes, but also helping teams think about, I mentioned this already, but experimentation. What does good experimentation look like? And what kind of research do we need to do? Because this is also new for the company. So ethnography, like real, true ethnography, in-market testing, dry click testing, getting things in front of consumers to really understand what they're going to do. I like to get out of the asking people questions business and into the like watching people do things business. So I think that's kind of where we're headed now. That's the trajectory we're on.
Got it. As I'm out in kind of the business development world, talking about potential projects, one of the questions that I get from folks who don't have behavioral science as part of their organization is, how do you build this team? Who are these people? And where do they come from? So Dustin, I'm curious, as you've had 10 years of experience doing this, you've done it, what are the roles that you think about in terms of building that team? And where do you go find those folks?
Yeah, sure. For us, again, we take the approach where we're blending science and people with science backgrounds and merging that with human-centered design as well. My team has typically consisted of folks that are PhDs in organizational psychology, masters in public health, cognitive science. But you can look more broadly. You can think about even the value that a statistics person can add to your team, data science people, the social and social sciences and psychology more broadly. The other piece that I think is important about that, yes, it's important to share that knowledge and spread and diffuse that knowledge throughout the organization. But bringing in people from academia with research backgrounds, folks that don't want to be in academia any longer, with a theoretical background or a research background really helps. Understanding how to apply theory, how to apply evidence, in addition to experimentation and things like that, I think adds a true value on the front end, right? So when doing that formative research, to understand the problem space, to understand the context, the population, again, what those determinants of behavior are, and coding that to sound theoretical constructs so we can use the right techniques to change what needs to change. That all comes from folks that typically have a good deal of experience in an academic or a research background. Looking for those folks, yeah, straight to academia. There's a few now that's such a growing field. There's a few job boards and things like that. Society for Judgment and Decision Making hosts free ads if you need it. People Science has a URL for job posting boards. And behiring.us, Be Hiring Us, they've got one too. And I think those are all good places, either free or typical cost associated. But those are good places to go. We, of course, get people coming straight to us. But it's great to be able to tap those networks as well.
Very good. Anything to add on that, Neesha?
No, I mean, I think that was great. The only thing that I would add, just being in financial services and needing to generally hit the ground running, I typically look for people who do have some financial services background, and certainly some of the other things that I heard earlier today, right? Curious mindset, people who can hold their truths lightly, right? People who are not going to be tied to outcomes and who are willing to like shift and move and be sort of nimble in their thinking. These are traits that I look for. I think that's really important as we try to set things up and get people comfortable with not everything is going to work.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of building things at Prudential, I'm curious to hear just about the challenges that you've had in doing that, and if the goal is to have behavior change and behavioral science be kind of business as usual at Prudential, how are you going to go about doing that?
Yeah. So challenges are big. It's a big company, big challenges. I would say, the biggest challenge is really around, right? What is this Chatham House rule? Can we invoke that right now? So one of the big problems is like, as this has grown at Prudential, oh man, I really shouldn't say this. This is my mouth problem that I have. So it's a pretty sexy thing to have, right? People want to do behavioral science. It's pretty cool. Everybody wants it. I feel a little bit like a hot potato right now. So I've actually been in 3 different organizations in the last couple months, which is a challenge. It's really hard because you have business leaders who are really interested in owning this capability, but then have different visions for it. So I would say at a large organization that's politically sort of fraught, sometimes this can be a real challenge because it's hard to drive impact when you are moving around and there is a different vision for what good looks like. And so like being internally strong, I think, is really important for me, and continuing to like try to avoid some, I think, was it Stephen this morning who said that like, if you're not about to get fired, you're not doing it right? So I feel like I'm living that world, right? I'm constantly just like, no, like I know what the right thing to do is, going out and doing the right thing and being just really committed to the business and committed to the outcomes, I think it's hard sometimes to maintain that focus when you are a headline. So that's one thing I would say. And for anybody who takes on this challenge, you will become a headline. It is that kind of thing right now. But I think there was another part of your question, I think.
Just in terms of it becoming business as usual,
Yeah.
more of an ingrained part of the culture.
Yeah, I think, that's where the democratization really comes in, right? So, I said I do a lot of teaching around the business, and I've, probably like 250 people this year, right? And just by myself. So hopefully next year we'll be able to scale that and do many more. But as people get interested in this work and start taking it on, I mean, people are brilliant, right? All over the business. And it doesn't take them long to like start to be able to read things and pick them up on their own and start to be able to do research well and understand like, okay, now I understand what you mean by like develop a learning agenda and what's a hypothesis and how do I build a learning agenda that moves me towards a business case. These are things that people can pick up, and I feel like that's where like the real exciting stuff is happening, because then people will like send me random decks or random things, be like, oh, look what I did. I'm doing these email A/B tests. Like, what do you think? And I think that's the really exciting part for me. That's where I feel like, okay, it's popcorn now. It's starting to happen organically around the business.
That's great.
That's cool.
I want to leave some time for questions from the audience.
So we do have some. First up, how do you walk the line or help your organization walk the line between behavior science for good versus for manipulation or financial gain?
Man.
You want me to take that?
Yeah, you take that. We're all about good. I've got nothing more to say.
Yeah.
We're consultants.
So luckily, I haven't walked into this problem yet. I like to think that Prudential is kind of always trying to do the right thing by the customers, right? There are times when what I do see is like a version of p-hacking, which is like hacking a specific metric, right? Somebody wants to NPS hack. Somebody wants to do certain kinds of like, they want a certain metric to look a certain way. So it's like, oh, so when should I send this survey out if I want to get people like peak end theory and I want to like get them at the top of the peak? And it's like, no, that's not how we should do this, right? Like we need to think about these kinds of things differently, because we want to be able to really understand what, people's full experience was, not just catch them at the top of the peak when you've like made them really happy or like refunded them like $6,000. That's like not the right time. So this is kind of where I see some of this stuff happening, where it's around, people wanting to make their own sort of team metrics look good. And I don't think anybody's doing it maliciously, but it really is like, well, I mean, we are doing this stuff. We might as well just like do this survey now, right? So yeah, that's what I would say. So luckily, nothing too malicious.
Can I add? I think, too, it can help if you think about the objectives to which you are aiming your work. Are we trying to help an individual or a population reach an objective good? Mm-hmm. Or are we helping them to reach a subjective good that you, without a doubt, can say is helping them to follow through on their motivations, on their needs, on their intentions? That helps a lot. Help the people. Love the people.
Yeah, I love that.
And one other question. When are rewards and incentives detrimental to motivation? And why are U.S. companies crazy for them?
Oh, can I take this one?
Yes.
Almost always, the research would show. What we have is an effect where you can get good initiation of behaviors, whatever those behaviors may be. If you want to get someone to exercise more, if you want to get them to spend differently, give them an incentive, give them a reward. In the beginning, it will help. What happens is they attenuate very quickly to that reward, and it's something called the crowding out effect or the undermining effect. When that hits, and why that hits is suddenly people see that the reason for their behavior is not for the motivation, it's not because they want to do it, it is because they are getting that reward. I see my behavior as striving strictly for that reward, not for the benefit that it may give me. screw this, I'm no longer interested in doing this behavior, and you have that hockey stick drop-off immediately. We have to be very careful about when we use rewards. It's not that they don't work, it's that their effects don't typically last unless we can build the intrinsic motivation to support behaviors in a more positive, natural, self-fulfilling way. There's tons and tons of research on this. Oh, and why? Because the system is set up to do it. It makes good sense. I like money. I want to get paid for stuff. If you're going to pay me for stuff, especially if it's good for me, I'll take it. But guess what? Even if I think that is true, even if I believe that is true, there becomes a moment in time where that effect will kick in and my behavior will start to slide. It's almost universal, no matter the context. Excellent. Yes.